headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Would it be really good if we had our newspapers focusing on issues that would actually save lives, help people cycle, get to work safely, and reduce costs for poor people? Instead, we've got this rubbish story again in the Telegraph that is a non-story.
Well, it's not a non-story, is it? They went there and they went to a junction where somebody is being killed. And they said, how many cyclists are jumping the red light? So we'll monitor it for an hour, and four out of 5 cyclists jump the red light. I mean, that's reasonably newsworthy in the context, surely.
It's a non-story for two things. First of all, the tragedy that happened 6 years ago didn't happen at the junction, happened on the road. It didn't happen at the junction. The woman stepped out into the middle of the road and Charlie crashed into her, and that was a tragedy. But it wasn't at the junction and it wasn't red light jumping.
Okay, so I think they were identifying it as the vicinity, perhaps. But
yeah, I think it's important because they're mixing up a tragedy 6 years ago with junction use.
Well, I think they're making the point that sometimes cyclists can be dangerous too, and if you're jumping red lights, then that's clearly very dangerous for no one else but the cyclist, for goodness sake.
Well, actually, be frank with you, it is anybody, whether they're walking, cycling or driving, can be bad, they can be dangerous, and they can be unfortunate to others. However, if you look at the facts over the last 15 years, I only know of one case in 15 years where somebody was killed by cyclists red light crashing, whereas 5 people a year are killed by drivers red light crashing. When has the Telegraph featured a report, or how many times have Talk Radio discussed red light jumping by cyclists versus by drivers? And I would argue it's the wrong way around.
But I think probably most people kind of know that based on the fact that there are a gazillion times more cars than there are bikes around, and they've been around for a lot longer. And also, you said it's a sort of Daily Telegraph anti-cycling thing. I mean, it is a debate right now when hundreds of millions of pounds are being spent on cycle lanes, and there is a big conversation, Donnachadh, about the restructuring of roads and lanes being closed off to allow for cycle lanes, etc. So there is a current debate around this, and I think, maybe people just want cyclists to be abiding the law like most car drivers do.
Well, I think like, what did you just say?
Like most car drivers do.
Well, the vast majority of car drivers...
4 out of 5 car drivers don't jump red lights, by the way.
The vast majority of car drivers break the law on speeding. Huge numbers break the law.
So they might do 77 on a 70 on a motorway. So they
break the law on speeding, they break the law on mobile phone usage, and they break the law on red light jumping, and they kill people.
Cyclists do all of those things as well, don't they?
We don't.
You've got a mobile phone, you've got your headphones on, you're doing no-handed, jumping a red light.
Every day this week, 30 people will be killed or seriously injured, their lives destroyed by a driver. And we don't know their name, like Charlie Ellison. Why do we know Charlie Ellison's name? Because he's the only person who did that in probably 10 years. And that's why this debate is completely out of order. And what we need to do is go back and look at what makes our roads safer. What should we be investing in?
They've got progressively safer. You know that. They've got safer in the sense of how cars are built. They've got safer in the sense of how roads are built. They've got safer in the sense of the kind of penalties that are now issued for things like mobile phone use, etc. Doesn't eradicate it all. I mean, people, I'm sure, are killed walking along the pavement. There's bound to be a rather grim statistic for that, and through all manner of accidents. But are you condoning then cyclists going through red lights? Are you saying it's okay?
I don't condone.
Because I think it's I think you're a very naughty boy, Donnachadh.
I don't condone dangerous cycling. I don't condone dangerous driving. What I am saying is that the difference between the two is one is using a lethal weapon. But there's an important point here where I will think we should have a serious debate, is that in many countries in Europe, they actually, the law says that a cyclist treats the red light as a yield right of way. It's called the Idaho Law. And they found when they introduced that, it was safer, the accidents didn't increase, and it meant the conflict between cyclists and drivers was significantly reduced. Studies in London have shown that women obey the law on red light jumping higher than men by a rate of 2 to 1. And women are killed more often by HGV trucks, turning left and killing them.
Yes, so but that's not about the red light, is it? That's the notorious left turn scenario.
The law, what I'm saying is, if we treated the law like they do in many European cities, What actually would happen is that we have a cyclist treats it as a right of way, and if it's
why would a red light be a right of way? What's the logic of that?
Because just like because it would allow the cyclists to get out of the way of the HGV trucks. And it would stop this conflict.
So you could cross a busy junction where cars are coming the other way and you'd be in the right.
Where there's no cars. When there's no cars, you're allowed to cross.
All right, so
in places like Paris and Brussels and other cities, it's a right. The pedestrian has the top priority, cyclist second priority, and driver third. And that would make a sense and stop this conflict about something that doesn't cause a serious amount of crash.
It causes a lot of terror to drivers when a cyclist bombs out of a red light and you're going in the opposite direction legally. That's not good. I mean, we get a lot of that with cyclists because clearly there are bad car drivers and there are some bad cyclists as well. And cyclists have been given a kind of free rein because you're sort of armour-plated, Donnachadh, with this moral thing. As we know, you're the nice guys. You're not damaging anyone. Statistically, you don't hurt anybody. You don't pollute the environment. So therefore, your starting point is you're already ahead of the game on this.
Well, isn't that true?
Well, it's true that you're not...
Everything you said is true.
Yes, the difference is...
I'm making the point.
Yeah, but there's 1% of you and 99% of drivers. And your 1% is never going to increase by any substantial amount. You know that, despite the amount of lanes they're sticking into cities. So the fact is we've got to find a way to harmonise this. Well, how many... What's the percentage of cyclists in big cities?
Less than 1% of roads in central London have got cycling infrastructure. We spend a fraction of the amount on cycling as we do on driving. 99% of the investment on roads goes for drivers, less than 1% for cyclists. We should be actually doing the opposite to encourage.
But when we're talking about you're talking about big main roads. It's a cost of living issue. It's an
equalities issue. It's a cost of living. Thousands of people, a quarter of people in London.
Why is it an equalities issue?
Because the poorest people in London don't have cars. Hundreds of thousands.
So you're saying the poorest people have bikes?
Hundreds of thousands of people depend on their bikes for getting to work.
Donnachadh, this is the bit you're not getting. Cycling is a minority thing and will remain a minority thing. It is still a minority thing in central London. It isn't in many
other major cities. The reason why it's a minority in this country is because it's been designed around car drivers. It's car-centric country.
Yes.
It's anti-human.
Car driving for a good reason, of course, because that's the way we got from A to B. That's how we did commerce, social mobility. You know, you talk about poor people. Poor people's social mobility has been enhanced by the motor car, not by the bicycle. Try and see me Auntie Maureen in Scunthorpe on a bike. It's not possible.
Sorry, things that aren't possible is just ridiculous. 70% of kids in Holland cycle to school, 2% in this country. The majority of kids cycle to school in the 30s, and we designed them out. We forced them off the road with our cars and refused to design the road for them. Why are you so anti-child?
Why am I anti-child?
Yes.
Well, how do you extrapolate that? Come on, you're a grown-up man, you're a journalist, Donnachadh.
Why are you
I am anti-child? Yes, I want to ban children. That's clearly my secret agenda here.
By actually refusing to endorse safe infrastructure so kids can cycle safely to school, you're condemning them to probably a life of inactivity, diseases, and early death.
Because of a car?
Because of the fact that they can't cycle to school safely because the infrastructure isn't put in.
Not all kids can cycle to school. We don't have a comparable infrastructure with the Netherlands that you mentioned.
Why not?
We don't, because the whole story, as I'm sure you know, of Netherlands becoming a cycling nation was nothing to do with the environment or getting fit. It was to do with petroleum. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes, and what's the story we have right now? It's the exact same story yet again. Why are we spending 50 years failing to learn the lesson?
People can ride a bike if they want to. People do.
Holland learned the lesson. Holland learned the lesson in the 70s that actually there was two reasons that actually why Holland changed. First of all, the oil crisis, and they realised that if we actually build cities fit for people and kids, we'll reduce the need for oil and we'll have safer, healthier families. And the second thing they did was that they realised that it was actually more efficient. You can actually get 10 to 12,000 people down a road on bikes. You can only get 2,000 people on cars. So, it chokes up our cities unnecessarily. Bad for the economy.
All right, and we are not alone in being what you would call car-centric as a country. We're not even top of the league table in that respect.
I think in European terms, we're the worst. We're the most car-centric
Have you been to Paris?
Yeah, Paris is investing millions in cycling infrastructure.
Have you not seen Do you not see the cycle lanes that Sadiq Khan has built down in London? There's hundreds of millions of pounds has been spent on them, east to west, north to south. They're everywhere.
There's around 1% of our roads in central
well,
London.
if you add it up statistically, I'm sure every
secondly, you talk about
every metre of road that goes through the little nooks and crannies of ye old Victorian London, I'm sure that's true. But the major routes have been serviced brilliantly, if you want to look at it that way, to allow for cyclists. The embankment being the obvious one, which is a very clear area that is now marked out just for cyclists. That was never there before.
No, I agree, and we're going in the right direction, and that's.
But you want more than that. You want more than an entire lane. You want more.
I want
lanes.
every city in the UK to be designed so that kids can get safely to school. That's what we want, like they have in other countries. What is wrong with that?
Well,
and what's actually, you talked about the embankment, you talked about North South. Those are the first two major ones, and they've been hugely successful. 3.5 million people a year using two of them. Just two cycle loops. Yeah. 3.5 million people.
3.5 million people every day, though, is it? Do you just back to the?
I didn't actually think they'd be that successful so fast.
But I mean, just the overarching point. Can we get it on record? Because you are, after all, the climate columnist at the Independent. That you would condemn cyclists who jump red lights.
I would condemn people who jump red lights dangerously, and I would call for a change of the law to allow us to use red lights as a yield right of way. So we have a sensible law so we all can exist efficiently and safely on our roads.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.